watching Morning at NTV.
Well, on to our first discussion for the day. This Thursday's edition of Morning at NTV is going to be focusing on Kenya Innovation Week 2023. My name is Priscilla Regina Naloga, and welcome to our Tech Note, Accelerating Africa's Innovation Potential. Now, just to give you a brief background, in 2023, you do have the Kenya Innovation Week hosting the Commonwealth Edition themed Innovation to Unlock Our Commonwealth. That is the theme. This edition is going to be focusing on leveraging on innovation to advance wealth creation for societal well-being. It's going to be held from the 27th of November, which has already started, and it will be closing business tomorrow, the 1st of December 2023, at the Edge Convention Center, Nairobi, Kenya. Now, to put this whole conversation into perspective, we're honored to be having it with the Kenyan High Commissioner to Uganda, Ambassador Geoffrey Okanga. Good morning to you, Mr. Ambassador.
Thank you, Priscilla. That's the old ambassador. My name is Maj Gen George Owino.
Major General
George Owino, not
George.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
That is a former ambassador.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, Major General, we want to first understand the history of Jamhuri Day. Where does it come from, especially from the perspective of Kenya?
Thank you very much, Priscilla, and thank you for having me in your studio to discuss a very broad area of concern that you brought up. Jamhuri is a Swahili word that means republic. So Jamhuri Day is when Kenya became a republic. It is what I would consider like your birthday. So if you look at it in the context of your birthday, you know what your birthday means. Mm-hmm. That is the day Kenya was born, Kenya became a republic. Of course, historically we know that most of Africa, Kenya included, was under the colonial rule. Then the transition of colonial rule to Kenya having its own government was to have a republic first and then to have a government. So Jamhuri is the 12th December of 1963 when Kenya was born. Kenya became a republic. So that is what Jamhuri means. Then the transition now was for the colonial government, who was a governor, to hand over power to the Kenyans, which was done in 1st June of 1964, which you normally celebrate called Madaraka Day. Madaraka is power. So that is, you became a republic and you are given the power. So that is the history of Jamhuri. So what we are talking about is every year you celebrate, the way you celebrate your birthday every year. So Kenya celebrates its birthday every 12th December as Jamhuri Day.
All right. What are the traditions that you practice around this Jamhuri Day?
Again, I still use the analogy of your birthday. On your birthday, depending on your culture, you cut the cake, you sing for you, and all that kind of stuff. Now, this is now at the national level and the community level. So it's a day that you undertake national celebrations where you have military parades, because you are demonstrating your republicity. You are a republic, so you are demonstrating. We are a republic. Who are we? You define yourself. You showcase who you are. You demonstrate the madaraka that you got, that you are independent as a republic, and you showcase what you have. Traditionally in Kenya, you'll find on Jamhuri Day, initially it used to be just at the national level. Now it's even at a lower level, where you have various activities. Most part of the morning, then in the afternoons you'll find people celebrating in their own homes and so forth and so forth.
Okay. The theme this year is focusing on diaspora diplomacy for people-centered integration. Why that theme?
Now, this is very specific to what I'm doing in Uganda. First of all, as a country, every country has its own foreign policy, and that is what diplomacy is all about. It's about projecting a foreign policy. Now, Kenya's foreign policy, in the context of relationship with Uganda, how do we exercise our foreign policy? And foreign policy, really, you're projecting your interests and try to merge it the interests of the country where you are operating. And Kenya's foreign policy has 5 pillars. The peace diplomacy, economic diplomacy, environmental diplomacy, cultural diplomacy, and diaspora diplomacy. So we are exercising all that. But specifically in Uganda, as the Kenya High Commission, I look at diaspora diplomacy as very critical because of our geographical location. Kenya and Uganda were actually joined to the hip. We have a lot of Kenyans living in Uganda who are the diaspora. And therefore, to me, that diaspora in Kenyan diaspora in Uganda is a very important segment of Kenyan society. Secondly, it's a demonstration of how we can integrate. Because you come from your country, Kenya, you cross the border and you say there's no border, and you're into Uganda and you are settled in Uganda and you're living in Uganda well and you're doing everything you want in Uganda. Surely that is the first step of integration, meaning that we can coexist without those borders. And therefore we chose this particular theme, and particularly during this Kenya week, that we focus on the diaspora. Now I want to touch a little bit more about diaspora and the importance of diaspora, not only for Kenya but for everybody else. Because the definition of diaspora means you leave your country, go to another country for whatever reason. Either you are studying, you are doing business, you are working, or you are migrated to that other country. But you still have connections with your own country. So those connections are very important to us, and it's silently people don't realize. When it comes to monetary, for example, and because of the African culture, you never sever your roots with where you come from. So you'll find that if you're in Uganda, you still have your members of your family back home in Kenya, and vice versa. And you have that connectivity. And you'll find that in the true African spirit and culture, you are supporting some members of your family. So whatever livelihood you are having here in Uganda, you are supporting them in one way or another by sending money, which we call remittances. Now those remittances, cumulatively, is a lot of money. And I'll give you the example of Kenyans that last year, the cumulative remittances that Kenyans in the diaspora sent back home was more than what Kenya exported in terms of its number one export, which is tea. So what you're remitting home cumulatively is more than your number one export. What does that mean? It means that diaspora is also an export, right? So in my view, if here as a Kenya High Commissioner, I look at this diaspora as Kenya's export outside Kenya, if they are empowered, if they're well-oiled, and whatever they are doing, they do it better. If I can facilitate that with the Uganda government, that they do it better, they'll send back much more. Really. So that is really my focus on the diaspora. Secondly, this diaspora should be encouraged to expand, and that is where integration is all about. Once this Kenyan has come, you should not start thinking, I want to go back to Kenya to do what? You are part of this African community now. And therefore we chose this theme to focus on the diaspora, because you can focus on everything at the same time. Now, coming to the Kenya week, so this theme of the diaspora, we have had the diaspora focusing on celebrating Jamhuri Day. But we want more activities leading up to Jamhuri Day. So we have got quite a number of activities that diaspora are taking part in towards Jamhuri Day. And I think I'll want to go about each one of those and explain a bit. The first activity that we have is on 2nd of December, which will be Diaspora Day, because actually the theme is diaspora. So that day, Kenyans in diaspora organizing themselves. Quite a number of activities. We meet together, we exchange, what are you doing, get to know each other, showcase what you are doing, exchange, meet families, pray, do many things, and have dinner in the evening. That will be the first event, which is Diaspora Day. Then the second event, which is on the 5th of December, we are cognizant of the fact that there are people living with difficulties and problems. We have what we call a social responsibility day, where we identify people who have got certain challenges, or institutions certain challenges, and see how we can help. Last year, for example, we identified a school with children with disabilities and required certain supportive like wheelchairs and blankets and foodstuffs and things like that. And we were able to contribute and donate to that school. So we'll be doing the same again now to an institution like that, just to be part and parcel of supporting people who are disadvantaged as a community. Then the third activity, and which is very dear to me, is because sometimes we go through life not realizing the blessings that we have, and we forget to give thanks to the Maker. So we also have a day that will be a Thanksgiving Day. And the Thanksgiving Day, which we'll be doing in Entebbe, organized by the Kenyan diaspora in Entebbe, is just interdimensional prayer, giving thanks to God for taking us through the whole year up to where we are today. Now, the issue of environment, I know we'll be talking about it. We also have an environmental day, and I'm sure we'll be talking about environment. So that is a day we are looking at what is our contribution where we are in Uganda in terms of conservation of the environment, which it's a big program that we're working on, but Kenyans in diaspora working with Ugandans and other like-minded people to look at the issue of greening and the issue of conservation of the environment. And of course, we have now the actual Madaraka Day, Jamhuri Day, which will be celebrated. It's more of bringing in friends, not only the diaspora, but diaspora playing a big part of it, bringing friends from other countries, from other embassies, and friends in Uganda, to actually now celebrate our birthday, which is on 12th of December.
Okay.
So this is how now we have, as a Kenya High Commission, coordinating diaspora in activities leading to our so-called birthday.
Okay, yes. All right. Speaking of which, you have mentioned environment. I know that COP28 kicks off today in Dubai, but also you hosted the Kosi Festival back in Nairobi last year, and one of the commitments from the President William Ruto was to plant over 1 million trees as Kenya. Analysis of that, and also how does that spread into the diaspora being part of that commitment?
This, I think, the issue of climate change is real to us. I was telling people the other day that if I tell you that I drowned in the desert, it is like, is it possible? We had floods in Libya. Over 2,000 people died. So we used to be told about climate change and all this. It's real now, and we see it now. Of course, COP, you mentioned COP. There was the African Climate Summit, of course, the scope in starting off now. But those are very good initiatives. But how do you bring it down to life, the practical aspect of it? And tying that with the fact that, excuse me, that one of our pillars of diplomacy is environmental diplomacy. And then the vision of His Excellency President Ruto is to plant, the correction is not 1 million, it's 15 billion trees in 10 months. In 10 years, yeah, yes. 15 billion trees globally. That is his vision. Because really, when you plant trees, which is actually what greening is all about, it does not matter where you plant that trees. It is you're planting it globally. Now, what is happening that back home, out of that vision now, the relevant, the individual ministries and other organizations and individuals have different initiatives of how to actualize that. And you remember about 2 weeks ago when you have actually a tree planting day that was a holiday. And I was in Kenya that time. And literally, Priscilla, everybody I know planted a tree.
So
and
where do they get the trees from? They're provided by the government?
Yes, the government provided the trees. We have the Kenya Forest Service. And it was a wonderful thing. In fact, the estimate is that 150 million trees were planted on that Monday. That goes towards that contribution, 15 billion trees. Now, how do I actualize that as a Kenya High Commission here in Uganda? The ministries back home are planting trees and the institutions within the country. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Foreign and Diaspora Affairs, in fact, our ministry, Ministry of Foreign and Diaspora Affairs, because diaspora is given that importance, is an extension of the ministry back home. So, as we are operating outside the Kenyan boundaries, but the vision of the president does not end within the boundaries alone. So we have a program to also actualize that here in Uganda. Now, what we have done is that, and this is something that we're very passionate about. We have realized that there are also quite a number of organizations in Uganda who are doing most of this of the same thing that we want to do. So we are partnering with some of these organizations. So there's an organization like Pamoja Trust, 1 Million Trees, UNRWA, and many others. So we identified the Mabira forest, that like many other forests in the world that have been devastated now, to restock Mabira forest as part of our initiative. And we have partnered with, we looked at institutions and schools, which think schools are the best to do this. Because it is not just about planting trees, it's to growing trees. You plant it to make sure it grows. So we are partnered now with with a college in Jinja, Busoga College, and they have been very magnanimous enough. They have given us 100 acres of land to plant trees. So that is what we are starting with. So on the 8th of this month, we want to start by planting between 2,000 to 3,000 trees in that space of 100 acres. But because of the rainfall patterns, we know that in March, April is where we have the real rain season. So after the 2,000 trees that we're planting in 8th of January, as our conservation day, as part of Kenya Week, we want to build capacity so that come March, April rains, we'll have to populate the whole of those 100 acres with trees as our first stop. And it's a continuous program. So if you look at maybe 100 acres, we do typically something like 40,000 trees. They still have more land, so we want to continue that. We're also working with other schools in the region. We have 6 other schools in the region. And we want to also look at developing seed beds, so that for sustainability, because what we are doing now, these organizations I've mentioned are supporting us in terms of seedlings, labor, and things like that. We have also asked other supporters around who are supporting us in that endeavor. So that is our first step. And the longer term program is, because Mabira Forest touches all the way up to the Kenyan border, that is the Mount Elgon region. We want to expand it up to Mount Elgon region. I grew up in Mount Elgon region on the other side, and I can assure you, Priscilla, the rivers that are flowing into Lake Victoria come from Mount Elgon, about 4 of them, and they're drying up. So the Mount Elgon region requires to be restocked. So that is our wider vision, and of course, move into Lake Victoria Basin as part of that conservation. So that is our vision as we activate, as we actualize the President's vision. That is how we want to work with Uganda,
the diaspora.
And diaspora,
okay,
to actualize that.
That then requires more concerted effort to have stakeholders join this initiative. What is your advocacy towards that?
I think what is important is there's a lot of duplication in what people are doing. And therefore it's good to understand what is domiciled where. For example, when we came up with this idea, as I want to say, who else is doing this? And we realized UNRWA is planting trees along the highways. We realized that the government itself has got an agency that is doing that. So I think it's important that to identify who is doing what, and to try to concretize this thing into manageable structures. So it's to get the right structure and the right people doing the right thing. But it boils down to the fact that the important thing is that as a tree being put into the ground. So let us not also be so worried about the structures, but they help also to mobilize resources. So to me, I would like a situation where we have a framework that we know what is the structure that is focusing on climate change. For example, you've talked about COP. We went to Paris. All those good stories that were talked about, all those pledges, have they been met? No, they have not been met. Has a tree been put on the ground after Paris? Not necessarily. So I think for us, it lets us be practical about this. And that's why I'm saying we start with the 2,000 trees on the 8th, and I'm welcoming you to come and do that. And the future is we want to see Mount Elgon restocked. We want to see the Lake Basin restocked. Okay.
All right. Then let's also look at the element of people-centered integration. Within the East African region, what are the opportunities that lie within?
Millions. In fact, when you talk about integration, integration is not, to me, it's not an option. We should not even be thinking about it as an option. We should be saying, how do we make it better? The idea of East African integration, and again, starts from our birthday. Uganda's birthday, Tanzania's birthday. There were different birthdays, but our forefathers, and we must grant them that, their vision, realized that no, separately we are not going anywhere. We must integrate. And that's where the East African community started. It is the first integration that ever was thought of in the continent of Africa. And we also have the history, we know why it did not work. I think because of ideological differences, political differences, that were played around by other people, external factors that did not want this to happen. I think we learned from that mistake. After that, our leadership in the region, and I want to really commend His Excellency President Museveni, a Pan-Africanist, pushing for integration. Because you have realized that political integration, economic integration, is the way to go for our own strategic security. Now, what we are looking at now is Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania being joined by the others now. We have 8 countries now. Somalia came in the other day. Now, if you look at that, geographically, it's about 1.2 million plus square miles of land. We are talking about a population of more than 300 million. We are talking about joining the Indian Ocean and the Atlantic Ocean. And we are talking about the resource in between, human resource and other resources. So this is a huge potential region that can do so much in terms of its own people and for the rest of Africa. Therefore, it means that we must integrate. Now, the challenges of integration. Integration is like a marriage. You know, you get married, you come in, you have your own cultures, you have your own institutions, you have own, to get all these things seamlessly working together. Yeah, you have got rules and regulations in your own country, legislation issues. So you have to bring all this to work together. So whenever you see people struggling with why is this thing not working, it's being impatient. Let us be patient. Let us do the right things, because the last time we failed because some of the things we did not do right. So for me, I'm a proponent of integration, but let's take every step so that we do the right thing. I'll give you an example of trade, for example. I know you'll talk about it. If this commodity is being imported from Uganda into Kenya, what are the laws and regulations that govern the production of this in Uganda? Are they the same in Kenya?
Are they permissible in Kenya?
Yeah. So for a lay person, just say, take this to Kenya. But Kenya say, oh yeah, but the rules and regulations. So somebody in Kenya
let's talk about the rules of regulations.
Yes.
I know that our milk has had a challenge crossing into Kenya. I also know that our grain has constantly been challenged when it comes to, you know,
not really.
It from,
not really. You'll be
Uganda.
surprised. You'll be surprised.
So we want to find out, as you have rightly said it, the differences in standardization and regulation. How do we then integrate that too?
Absolutely. And that is the challenge that we must understand. That first of all, our birthdays were different. So you have grown up differently. You have grown up with different ways of doing things. You have your rules and regulations and legislations. We are not the same. So one of the things, integration, you must harmonize those ones. For example, movement of people. Now you can leave Kenya with your identity card and cross into Uganda. That was not there before. So that movement has been harmonized. So the same thing happens with goods and services. They must be harmonized. There's something called tariffs. Tariffs are taxes and custom duty they put on goods, right? So each country has its own tariff that they put on goods. So those ones are easier to harmonize, because you come and say, Kenya and Uganda, we agree, let us not tax water moving between the two, and you agree on that, right? So for the tariffs, it's easier to deal with. Now there are other barriers called non-tariff barriers. Non-tariff barriers now are not the customs and duty you're talking about. You're talking about how do you package this water. Your bottle must be of this size, you must label it this way. That is your regulation in this country. In Kenya also there's the same regulation. So for you to bring this water bottle with water into Kenya, you must conform with those regulations. So that means as much as we have removed the tariffs, we have also worked on the non-tariff barriers, which there's a mechanism now to work for it. What people don't know, for example, is like Kenya and Uganda have something called a joint ministerial commission. This is a structure that deals with these issues at the trade level. So you have the technical people sitting and discussing which are these barriers and harmonize them. What they are not able to deal with goes to the ministerial level to be dealt with.
Okay.
And what the ministers cannot deal with goes to the principals level. So this is a process. It is ongoing, and a lot of those barriers have been dealt with, but it will continue to be dealt with.
Well, as you have rightly said it, each country has its development pace. Yes. However, we still need to be mindful of the fact that time is of the essence if we're going to be an influential region on the continent later on to the rest of the world. Then what are those factors that need to be put into consideration for us to actually pick up momentum?
Priscilla, time is of the essence. I agree with you, but I'm also conscious of the fact that it does not matter how fast you're moving if you're moving in the wrong direction. So we'd rather move in the right direction at even a slower pace. For example, we are accommodating other East African community countries. We started at 3. we brought in South Sudan. We brought in DR Congo. Somalia is a latest kid on the block. So you must accommodate some of these things and say, hey, wait a minute. Is it better for us just to say, no, we'll not accommodate anybody else? No. For the greater good, everybody must come on board. And therefore, when you come on board, we must agree to accommodate whatever pace you are in. So, yes, time is of essence, but we must lay a firm foundation in what we are doing. So me, I'm a proponent of the fact that, yes, let's move. In fact, I would say let's move at the pace of the slowest and bring them on board.
All right. Ambassador, we are coming to the close of this conversation. Yeah. We would like to hear your last remarks and also commitment towards the ones in diaspora, but also to the Ugandan community. What do you commit towards the next 365 days before we see the next Jamhuri Day?
I think for me, first of all, let me start by saying I'm more Ugandan than Ugandan. That is the mindset that I have. So when I'm here, I am here at home and doing what I would do when I'm at home. And I don't want to look at myself and say, I'm Kenyan and what am I doing to Uganda? No, me, I'm home. Me, I'm part of the integration. So what are the opportunities that are here in Uganda that I can contribute to? Either anchoring on Kenya or just having seen those opportunities. One of them, I've talked about integration and the diaspora and the role of the diaspora that I see here in Kenyan diaspora. What are the strengths that Kenyans diaspora have that they can use here? So one of them, I think, is about food production. Uganda is blessed. I normally tell people that Ugandans, when you are greeting God, you removed your gloves. You are really blessed. You are able to grow food, a lot of food, fresh food. Kenya is a food deficient country because of the nature of our land. So there are huge opportunity, as you have said, that particularly Kenyans in the diaspora to engage themselves in food production for our own food security. I think that is an opportunity. Secondly, there are also other things that we as Kenyans are able to do working with Ugandans, like help to increase agricultural production through mechanization and skills and things like that. That is one area I really want to work on. The second one, of course, is what I've talked about, is the issue of environment. Because to me, I think that is critical for us. From science is telling us we have 7 to 8 years that if we don't start reverting where we are now, we are in trouble. So I think that is an area that I want to focus on. And by starting to plant the 2,000 to 3,000 trees on 8th of December, I want to talk to you here again this time next year and see, have we done the 40,000,
yes.
80,000 that we want to do? And I hope you'll invite me to come and give that scorecard.
Yes, we definitely will. Well, thank you so much, Ambassador Owino, for your time, and we wish you all the very best as the Kenyan High Commission and the commitment to the diaspora diplomacy for people-centered integration and the larger East African community. Of course, they are having the meet and greet that is happening on the 2nd of December, and then there will be a social responsibility activity on the 3rd of December. A Thanksgiving will be followed by that, and of course Environmental Day will be on the 8th of December to plant a tree. It takes one person to plant one tree, but if you put it all collectively, 45 million, that's 45 million trees that will be standing aloof and averting the effects of climate change. So let's collectively work together. Thank you so much for having been a part of this conversation. We take a short breather, return shortly.